Monster Vault Podcast.
Hey guys, happy Halloween, and thank you for joining us at the Monster Vault Podcast for our launch episode. That's right. You may be asking yourselves, well, who are these guys? Well, I'll be happy to tell you. We provide classic and contemporary horror commentaries. We review DVDs, Blu-rays, especially the ones released by Anchor Bay, Synopsy, and the beloved Shout Factory, and shout out for all of their wonderful commentaries and extras, and the quality of their Blu-rays as well. We do interviews with horror film industry people, fellow podcasters, local horror artists, and we try to provide you with the best classic and contemporary horror film entertainment, conversations. We're really just a group, or like a gathering of people who really love classic horror and want to keep it alive. And we thought that for tonight, the best way to launch this is to talk about an icon in the classic horror film and especially the horror film convention industry, and that is the monsterclub.com, Monster News. That's right. Now, the monsterclub.com was founded by Cheryl Duran, and I have a very unique and interesting perspective on the whole story because I'm her son and I was there for all of it. And it's a very interesting ride. It was a most amazing story filled with coincidence, luck, talent, drive, and most of all, passion and hard work, and a love for a very specific viewpoint on the fun and the entertainment of the classic monsters and how that influences today, and the importance of the resurgence in the 90s of all the classic monsters. So sit back, steal some Halloween candy from your kids, turn off the doorbell for a little while, and let's sit back and enjoy the history of the monsterclub.com and Monster News. Now, to tell this story, it really kind of goes back to my teen years. The lady who brought it all together, Cheryl Duran, whose credits are incredible. I mean, we'll go down the list here. We've got creating the Nightmares Cafe BBS back in the 90s, which was the launching pad for all of this. And then we've got the Carnival of Horrors in 1997, which was a huge success. Then we've got Monster News, a wonderful fanzine that circulated the conventions throughout the 90s and the early 2000s. It provided spotlights on actors and directors and great films. It provided advertising. It was a great way for industry people to get their work out there. It was circulated for free, and it circulated all over. And it's now a very collectible item. It was printed on kind of cheap newsprint. And if you can find one, they're, especially issue 1, they're kind of collectible now. Then we went on to create the monsterclub.com, which was kind of an anomaly in itself, and it has a wonderful little history and trivia about it, in that it was kind of created right at the time when the internet was first being invented, so it was kind of new and mysterious. And all of these horror actors were just clamoring to get advertising on and get a website because it was so new. And Cheryl kind of cornered the market back in that day because she was one of the few people that was able to do this and learned this. And she got the idea to start providing spotlights for these actors. And it was really great. And it's a fun story to get into how it all started. Then we go into the books, and she's known for writing such greats as the monsterclub.com Guide to Horror, Monster Movie Memories from Drive-In to Movie Palace. We produced a series of DVDs called Festival of Fright, which was a collection of classic horror trailers. She was also the producer of the Nightmares Cafe TV show. She served as the executive producer of the movie Stop It, You're Killing Me, directed by Kenny Yackel. Just a great career and a wonderful contributor of keeping classic horror alive. And so here's how the story breaks down. Back when I was a teenager, I grew up in that classic 80s horror genre. I mean, I was right there, smack dab in the middle of it. And Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, Leatherface, you name it, The Lost Boys, Fright Night, the best horror movies you can think of, I was right there in the middle of it. However, the lady who would go on to create all this, Cheryl, was terrified of monster movies back then. And as her son and as a teenager, me and my best friend, Jason, we absolutely reveled in the fact that she was terrified of it. And we used to force her to watch Phantasm. Shout out to Reggie. How you doing, buddy? And we used to just enjoy watching her freak out when we would turn Phantasm on at 1 o'clock in the morning. And that's kind of how it started. And then it kind of breaks down like this. My best friend and I started doing these cheesy haunted houses on Halloween. And we're talking the cheesy garage setup. Grabbing cardboard boxes from wherever and paints and cheap Halloween props from the Wishing Well and the Dollar Tree and things like that. Just anything we could do, get our hands on. And if a lot of you remember, like, the costumes back then weren't quite what they are today. We didn't have Spirit. We didn't have Halloween headquarters. Back then, we had to either buy some crappy little Jason mask that looked nothing like the movie at Coach House Gives for $50. Or we won't even talk about the crappy Dawn Post Michael Myers mask that was first available in the late 90s and the mid 90s. Oh, but that's what we had to work with back then. So we set up these cheesy haunted houses, and amazingly enough, lines started forming. People from other neighborhoods started coming, and we would have hour-long lines. I mean, for just this family putting on a cheap, cheesy haunted house. And Cheryl kind of got involved and started having fun, and I think it sparked some memories for her. And she remembered back to the 60s and the fun of the Addams Family and the Munsters and the resurgence of the Universal monsters on television. And a lot of the made-for-TV horror stuff of her childhood, she started no longer fearing it and started embracing her fond memories. TV shows like The Night Stalker, things like that, watching The Twilight Zone with her mom. And she decided, hey, you know what? This is actually kind of fun. Well, at the same time, she also had developed an interest in computers. Computers were becoming a big boom in the early 90s, and she had bought this computer for the house, and she wanted to start. First, she started writing stories, and then she started kind of getting into this editorial idea where she discovered her talents really lied with fact gathering and presentation of those facts. And she was kind of a natural-born journalist. And next thing you know, she's kind of got this idea she creates. She's like, there's this new thing called a BBS. Now, for those of you millennials out there are probably like, oh yeah, I think I might have heard about what a BBS was. Well, trust me, for us old people, we all remember the BBSs and Q Modem Pro and ICQ and MIRC and AOL and all of that original dial-up stuff. And BBSs were kind of the first real online experience before the internet even. And Cheryl created a BBS called Nightmares Cafe. And this is where it all started. She creates this BBS. It's a simple BBS, but it's fun. It's got some ANSI games. It's got this little forum where people can write this little thing called the Never-Ending Nightmare, where different people can log in and add to the story. And it really caught on, and just people liked it. And then the next thing you know, along comes a fellow named Jace, one of my good friends. Shout out, hey, Jace Whitman. Thank you so much for your contributions over the years. And Jace he was an artist and he was just a fan like Cheryl, and he became her co-sysop and started providing artwork, and they created a character called the Tomb Creeper. And pretty soon the Tomb Creeper became a pretty cool looking thing, and it started to take shape. And we've got this Tomb Creeper, and we've got this BBS, and we get these cool t-shirts made up, and it's becoming a thing. It's like, whoa, this little hobby on a computer in the back room is starting to become a thing. And then the momentous event happens. We go to our first horror film convention. It was a Fangoria convention at the Wyndham Hotel at LAX in 1996. And just by luck, it was a rare Fangoria that was hosting the Chainsaw Awards and honoring Roger Corman. So there was a lot of really cool people there. Well, we met all these great people, and we went as a family, and this amazing but coincidental thing happened. Cheryl went to the lounge to get a beer, and we were all kind of running around and collecting things and getting our swag and our autographs and stuff. Well, Cheryl had positioned herself in the bar at a table to rest, and she's like, well, just bring your stuff back here and leave it here at the table, and I'll watch the stuff. Well, she had to go to the bathroom at one point, and we weren't there. None of us were there, so she's like, what am I going to do? So she just leans over and asks this guy who's sitting like adjacent to her and says, hey, can you watch my stuff? And he's like, yeah, sure, no problem. Well, when she comes back, that guy plus a few other guys are sitting at her table. So she sits down, and she's like, hey, thank you, whatever. And she starts to overhear their conversation, and she realizes they're talking about being in Bird Eye Gordon's office, and this one guy had been in Night of the Scarecrow and some movies like that. And she starts to realize, hey, these guys are movie guys. These guys are in the industry. This is really cool. So she starts to strike up a conversation, and this guy introduces himself as Will Houston. He's kind of a writer, and I guess he was the Dr. Zombie in Dawn of the Dead 78, which was kind of cool. And I've since played back the Dawn of the Dead DVD, and you can actually see him in there as the Doctor. It's pretty funny. And he started introducing her to all these industry people. Like, he points over and he goes, hey, that's Reggie Bannister from Phantasm over there. And Cheryl's like, oh my gosh, and she's starstruck. But she starts to kind of talk to them on a human level. But the one thing that was brilliant was Cheryl made us all wear our Nightmares Cafe t-shirts. And they were all asking, what is this? What is this thing? This is so cool. Well, I think they kind of thought it was something bigger than it was. They didn't realize that it was just a little, this really cool little BBS. Well, in Cheryl's mind, she was already kind of looking at new horizons as far as the internet. It was starting to come out, and I think the wheels started turning. And we leave the convention with some really great contact information. And one shout out is to Reggie Bannister and his partner, Gigi Fastel Porter. Gigi was amazing. She kept in contact with us and just gave us some wonderful, wonderful connections to people. Well, as the BBS grew, we decided to put on the first horror convention in Northern California, in the Sacramento area. Well, Cheryl really made her footprint at this point because she changed the way conventions were made. And it's really a fascinating story. This was the first convention that not only had the guests, but it also had an arcade, it had carnival games, live music, a DJ, giveaways. It had virtual roller coaster rides, those like on a screen. She had a movie room where the director of the movie Lady in White, Frank LaLoggia, her friend at the time, came out and actually provided in-person commentaries with the movie while the audience watched, which was really amazing. We did a haunted house, all kinds of really cool. So we had psychics and everything. It was a blast. Well, Cheryl made more money than most conventions make their first time around. And on top of that, she also broke attendance records and made a new type of convention, a lot like a George Lucas incident with like the whole Star Wars 1977 changing the way movies were made. Cheryl will go down in history as having changed the way conventions were done. And she became good friends with like Ron Adams, who did Monster Bash back east, and a lot of these other Creature Find and a lot of these other contemporary horror conventions are done now. Cheryl was kind of the model from taking them out of that kind of a dealer room with a few celebrities and maybe a panel into a more fun carnival type atmosphere and event. And that kind of changed the game. Then that brings us into Monster News. And Monster News was a brilliant creation. It was a way for Cheryl to give back to the horror industry that had given her fond memories as a child. But it was also a way for her to have an artistic outlet that let other industry people advertise themselves. And this was brilliant because it was a product that was useful to the people in the industry, and it was free. It was created on cheap newsprint, and it was just a cool looking comic book looking kind of circulation. But it provided spotlights on actors and classic horror. It had spaces where she sold advertising on pages, and it was just a really cool thing. Brought us in touch with a lot of really cool indie and up-and-coming filmmakers who went on to do some really great stuff. And that kind of brings me to issue 1. Issue 1 was the flagship Monster News issue. It was the spotlight on Vincent Price and William Castle. And it really brought that resurgence back. And up until that point, Vincent Price was kind of talked about in reference of, he had done Edward Scissorhands, or he had done Michael Jackson's Thriller, but a lot of people weren't talking about Vincent Price at that point. His career had kind of fizzled out. And also William Castle, same thing. William Castle did some amazing things. Those movie gimmicks, The Tingler, The House on Haunted Hill, Mr. Sardonicus, he had done some really great movie gimmick stuff. 13 Ghosts. And Cheryl did a spotlight on that and really brought that back around again and let everybody. And Cheryl always told a story that up until that point, the only article that could be found was one small little blurb in one book about William Castle, and that was it. Well, after issue 1 got out and it circulates through the conventions, and we're putting it in comic book stores and record stores and you name it, everywhere that would allow Monster News to be delivered and picked up, it went out. And the rumor is that the remake of House on Haunted Hill with Jeffrey Rush was due to Cheryl and her issue 1. Somebody at a convention got hold of it, and one person talked to another person, and next thing you know, the movie got made. And it also spawned a lot of movies being released onto DVD, especially classic horror movies that up until that point were just kind of unavailable. And as the issues of Monster News progressed, the merchandise and the t-shirts and all these really cool things that are so rare and hard to find now kind of got out there and became kind of a cult classic. It kind of became a kind of, pop culture. And then came the book. And the book was kind of a long time in the making. Cheryl had always wanted to write a book, but what was really cool was when it came around to the Monster Club Guide to Horror, she was published as a first time. And that was quite an accomplishment. Then she went on to write the Monster Movie Memories Movie Palace to Drive-In, which was a phenomenally successful book. She self-published that book, but with the wonderful help of Mr. Lobo. Shout out to Eric Lobo. How you doing, buddy? Thank you for all your help. Mr. Lobo wrote the foreword, and Cheryl had the distinction of having her book release party with Mr. Lobo having a midnight movie showing of The House on Haunted Hill at the Crest Theater in Sacramento. And this was a wonderful event. Mr. Lobo actually had the crank device with the fishing line and the skeleton from the movie. And it was a fun, old-fashioned spook show. It was amazing. And Cheryl had her book release party, and it was a phenomenal event. And that collaboration really led one more time to Cheryl putting another footprint into the industry. Then, after the success of Monster Movie Memories, we produced a series of DVDs called Festival of Fright. And Festival of Fright was a wonderful collection of these old trailers that really kind of brought them back into your mind. The DVD artwork was incredible. It had great stuff on the cover. Just a great set of DVDs. Great set of DVDs. And then themonsterclub.com kind of became a wonderful forum. And it has remained that way ever since. It's been a great place for people to gather. And it's to talk about monsters and just to have that sense of community. And that's what themonsterclub.com provides today, as well as a collection of wonderful old-time radio shows. TheMonsterClub.com does feature a museum and photographs from their history, from their convention, from their different interactions with different celebrities, and it was the seed that led to who we are today, the Monster Vault. And the Monster Vault is really continuing that legacy on. We have a YouTube channel, got a Facebook channel, so guys, you got to check that out. Go to our website at themonstervault.com. Go check us out on Facebook. Go check us out. Go check out our YouTube channel, where we're going to have lots of content. There will be lots of goodies coming up. We're going to be doing Blu-ray and DVD reviews. Our first DVD review coming up right after the Halloween season here is going to be the Phantasm 5 DVD box set, and it is incredible. So look for that. That's coming up next. I want to thank you so much for joining us for our launch podcast tonight, talking about the history of the Monster Club, Monster News, and the importance of Cheryl Duran and all of the contributions that she's given to the industry. I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. Please subscribe to the channel. Please subscribe to hear future content, and we look forward to hearing more from you. And we want your feedback. Write us messages. Do whatever you want to do to let us know you're listening. Let us know you enjoy it. My name is Mike with the Monster Vault podcast. Thank you very much. Enjoy your Halloween.
The Monster Vault podcast.